I made 4 pizzas, same dough, same sauce, same cheese, because I wanted to find out if the shape of the cheese makes a difference at all. And to my surprise, it actually does matter, quite a bit. I'll explain the principles behind each method and give you examples of what kind of pizza shops are using which. So let's get going, because today we're talking. Okay, so first things first, we're gonna make a quick and easy homemade pizza dough. And to keep things quick, today we're gonna be going with a sort of hybrid between a New York style and a Neapolitan style that I'm gonna cook quickly on our outdoor oven. As always, the full recipe is in the description down below, and getting it into a rough mix for a couple minutes. And I added the dry yeast to the water before mixing, and then the salt about halfway through. You could also help build a little extra strength by bringing the water and the flour together, letting it rest for a bit, and then adding the salt and yeast. That's called an autolyse, and it helps to kind of get the gluten going before adding everything in. So after about 5 to 6 minutes of mixing, I'm just gonna get it into a large rough ball, and we're gonna do what's called a bulk ferment. Just basically let it hang out until it's sort of doubled in size and has got some nice air in there. And once the bulk ferment is finished, I'm gonna get it into 250 gram dough balls and let it hang out for a little bit longer, or better yet, overnight or a day or two in the fridge. The longer it goes, the more that the flavor develops and you get some more fermenty and complex flavors. And like I said, this is my quick homemade pizza dough, but if you're looking for something a little bit more advanced, check out my Sari's pizza recreation video. I do a sort of deep dive on how they make it and how to replicate it at home. And in my opinion, it's the perfect pizza. So you'll want to take your dough out of the fridge at least 2 to 3 hours before you're ready to use it, because you want it to come up to room temperature so it's easier to stretch. And I usually like to start out by pressing the air out from the middle towards the edges. The more airy and larger of a crust you want, the more careful you want to be not to puncture it with your hands. So set an invisible barrier around the edge and never go past it. Then I like to spin it around on the board a little bit and then pick it up and let gravity do the work. So like I said, all these pizzas are going to be the exact same, so they're going to be stretched to the same thickness, and I'm going to do my best to use the same amount of sauce on all of them, which might be a little hard because someone stole my ladle. Now, one of my personal favorite saucing methods is to use a light layer on the bottom and then do some stripes on top of the cheese, but for consistency's sake here, I'm just gonna get a generous portion just right onto the dough and then leave it at that. So keeping things simple, we're gonna start off with just a good old shredded cheese. And today we're gonna be using a full fat, low moisture mozzarella for everything. You can use a fresh mozzarella, which has a way higher water content, but what I'd do is I'd slice it and then just let it hang out in the fridge, uncovered, maybe on a paper towel for like an hour or two, just to kind of help remove some of that moisture, because otherwise your pizza is gonna turn into more of a soup. So I'm shooting for a nice even distribution here, and I don't like to over cheese my pizzas. I find that there's a certain point where there's a marriage between the cheese and the sauce that is just kind of the sweet spot for me. I'd say that shredded cheese is among the most popular of pizza shops in general. Some recent hype and notable spots might be Lindustry or Sari's Pizza. Alright, once the cheese is down, I'm gonna get some basil leaves on here for color and just for that fragrance that they give to the pie. Then I'm going on with some fresh grated Parmesan for a little bit of sharpness and just a contrast in flavor. And lastly, some extra virgin olive oil, which is gonna help the basil kind of fry up versus just burn in the oven. Alright, I'm going into my outdoor pizza oven, which gets a bit hotter than my indoor one, but I've got it on the lowest setting so that we can get a little bit of a hybrid between a dark, crispy New York pizza and a soft, pillowy Neapolitan. And once the cheese is bubbly and we got a little bit of char, we're gonna get it onto a cooling rack so that we don't steam the bottom and lose our crisp. So the first thing that stands out is that the cheese spreads out nice and evenly, and it comes together nicely with the sauce to create that sort of oneness that I mentioned earlier. So it has a creamy texture and a nice stretch to it, and I can see why this is a classic. Alright, I'm interested to see how this is gonna stack up to the others, so we're gonna move right into our next one, which is gonna be cubes. So I've worked with cubes quite a bit, and I think the main benefit is how easy it is to slice and just get right onto the pie. Also, it can work in your advantage if you're looking for a big contrast between darker, bubbly areas and less caramelized, milky sections. I've seen a lot of home cooks utilize these in YouTube videos, and they're really great for a higher temp outdoor pizza oven. Alright, I'm just going to finish it off the same exact way we finished the first one, and I tried to use about generally the same amount of cheese total. I'd say the inside of this pizza oven's sitting around 700 degrees Fahrenheit, and each bake is taking about 4 to 6 minutes, which for me is sort of the perfect hybrid between a New York and a Neapolitan. You could see what I was mentioning about the contrast between the more darkened, charred sections and the lighter, milkier ones. And on top of that, there's a lot of contrast going on in the pizza in general between the sauce and the cheese. They don't really marry together, but sometimes contrast can be nice. Pretty good. I think, in my opinion so far, I like the shredded more. So now we're going to test out some thin slices, which I'm actually really excited about because I've only used them once or twice, and it was a long time ago. My main concern here is that because they have so much surface area and they're really thin, that they might be a higher risk to burn in the oven, but we'll see how this goes. There's a lot of pizza shops that utilize these, but most notably Frank Pepe's in New Haven, which is a super iconic spot. And if you guys are liking this video and want some more experiments like this, please give me a like down below. It goes a long way. So I've been getting a little bit of differentiation in the darkness of the crust between each of these pizzas. It's just part of the nature of working in a really hot and small oven like this. There's a lot less room for error. Now that this one's out of the oven, I'm actually a little bit surprised. It didn't burn like I was expecting, and it actually formed a really nice cohesion with the sauce. In fact, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Yeah, that tastes exactly how it looks. Jeez. Alright, on to the next. So our final contestant is going to be these kind of hand-torn, rustic, varied sized tears. And I'm really interested to see how these come out because of the size variation. I'd say these are probably the most commonly used in Neapolitan style pizzas, so I want to see how they fare in a hybrid type situation. And I also wanted to let you guys know that if you've been digging the background music, I write it all myself, and you can find it on Spotify and Apple Music under John Dre FM. And you can download the files for free on my Patreon, which is also where I host all of my recipes completely for free. No sign up required. My channel isn't big enough yet for sponsors, but over on Patreon I'll be posting additional recipes and videos and other content, so if that's something you're into, please consider supporting my content with a paid membership. I'll leave a link down below. Alright, once again, finishing off with a little olive oil, and I did my best to try and use the same amount of cheese that I've been using on the other pizzas. Alright, this one's looking pretty sweet. I'm just gonna dome it a little bit to get a little extra char right here at the end, and yeah, alright. So on first look, it kind of has a vibe of a mix between the cubes and the shredded. It didn't get particularly dark, and it looks the cheesiest of all of them so far, but that might be my fault. Alright, let's see how it is. Okay, pretty good. I could see how in a 800 plus super hot oven, this might be the way to go. Alright, so now that we got enough pizza for the apocalypse, let's do a quick review. I'd say thin slices and shredded are pretty much tied for a New York or even hybrid style pie like this, but if I had to pick one, thin slices gets my vote. The melt is way smoother and more consistent, and you've got the option to go light on sauce underneath with a few stripes on top, which is my personal favorite approach. That layering really takes it to the next level. Then I think rustic tears would land at number 3 for me. Where they'd really shine would be a true Neapolitan style pizza where the oven's cranked up to 800, 900, even 1000 degrees. Cook them in 60 to 90 seconds, the cheese will spread out nice and not really have an opportunity to burn. Then coming in last, at least for our application today, is the cubes. Getting an even spread is a bit of a challenge, and the melt just isn't as uniform. That said, at the end of the day, pizza's still pizza. Drop a comment down below, let me know your go-to method or if there's a cut that I didn't think about or missed. But seriously, if you want to make the best pizza of your entire life in your home oven, watch my series pizza video. It actually utilizes a hybrid of cheese in a really interesting way, so make sure you guys check that one out. Alright, we did it. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.